Well, welcome to the show, everybody. As you know, I'm Derek Bros, and this is Global Witness. And as you most likely see on your screen there, the amazing David Icke.
Gosh, somebody just walked.
So I'm sure most of my viewers, David, already know who you are. But David has been at the forefront of what I would call the truth movement, of an understanding of the illusions that exist in this world to everyone. And I believe that David is probably more responsible for waking people up to those truths than anyone else. He's been doing this for about 30 years. I could tell you that his books that I know of have been distributed. I personally have sent, I'd say probably I've purchased probably 100 of your books for different people and sent it to. So I've supported the cause for certain. And
you're the one that bought some then.
So I wanted to, because you do have a new book out now, and everything you need to know. So I wanted to just quickly, if you could just give everybody a brief explanation of that book, and then I do have questions that people have emailed, and I have personal questions for you, because my channel specifically focuses on the spiritual and our absence of it. So we'll definitely get into that. But if you could just give a brief explanation of what this latest book, Everything You Need to Know, is about.
Well, everything you need to know but have never been told, it is. And it's, of course, not absolutely 100% every last syllable, dotted I and crossed T that you need to know. What it is what people need to know to understand the world as it really works, rather than the one that we're told to believe in. And so I have pulled together a vast number of subjects and showed how they connect, how, you know, the introduction of 5G connects to the banking system, connects to Middle Eastern wars, connects to the suppression, talking of the subject you've introduced, the suppression of the knowledge of reality and the very reality that we're experiencing. So, and the nature of the who we are. All these things connect, and why over centuries, actually thousands of years, the same unfolding agenda has continued. People are born, people die, people are born, people die, and yet this agenda moves on, and it's founded on the incessant centralization of power. Because when there's a few and you want to control the many, you have to centralize decision making. The more diversity there is, the less control any central cabal is going to have. So what you do is incessantly centralize power, and every point you do that, fewer and fewer people are dictating to the lives of more and more people. So we started out in tribes, and the tribes made the decisions about what happened in the tribes. Then we had this point where we created what are called nations. That was amalgamation of lots of tribes. Now a few people at the center of the nation are dictating to all the former tribes. And now in Europe, we have the European Union, which is an amalgamation of countries being dictated to by a few people from the center. In other words, dictating to all those nations that are all those other tribes. And if you look at the so-called trade groupings, they are also centralization of power operations. And so we've moved on and on and on to the point now, and this is where everything fits in. You know, I'm talking about trade groups and talking about, you know, centralization of power. And that brings me into something that most people wouldn't think connects at all, and that's Silicon Valley. But it does, because what is the greatest expression of the centralization of power in the world today than the centralization of power over what we see and don't see?
For sure.
Which is what the Silicon Valley internet giants like Google and Facebook, etc., are actually doing. We've got this small area of land in California now from which what we see overwhelmingly in the world as more and more information goes onto the internet and away from other sources, dictating what we see and don't see. And what does that dictate? It dictates perception. Perception comes from information received, whether it's a personal experience or what people see on the internet or in a newspaper. And what else comes from perception? Human behavior. What we'll challenge, what we won't challenge, what we'll do, what we won't do, what we'll accept, we won't accept, the way we see things or don't see things, all comes from our perception of a situation. And the perception of the situation comes from information received. So control of information controls human perception, which controls human behavior. This is where we're going. And once the control of information goes into as fewer hands as it is now, so does human control on a scale we've not seen before up to this point in terms of centralization of power. And of course, all this censorship of alternative information that we're seeing is all part of this master plan, if you like, of dictating what people see and don't see, and thus the perceptions people have or don't have.
You know, I was an executive at Microsoft for 4 years running Windows strategy. So, so obviously I've seen how it operates, but I can tell you what I found to be remarkable about it is that people are participating without really knowing they're participating.
Exactly.
And this is the terrifying part of it, is that as the group Anonymous, which I was very involved in its early stages, because it was about getting the information out, and the mask itself was to prevent people from judging who was giving the message. So they wouldn't judge them as poor, stupid, black, white, educated, uneducated, rich, poor, didn't matter, right? So that was the entire point of the Anonymous mask. And it functions very well for that. And with that, the Anons getting information. Now, the people think that Anonymous were a bunch of people in their basements, in their mom's basements. There's people at extremely high levels of corporations. That's where the suit and the tie with the question mark where the head was. You don't know who this, and it doesn't have a head. It's a group. And all of the group has the same idea in mind, which is getting the information out to the people. And what Anons had done, David, is as you began to continually dig deeper into the information, and WikiLeaks information would come out, as you got deeper and deeper, eventually you ran up against a wall where there was nothing there, and there was nobody to actually identify. And you began to recognize that there is a far more evil source to this that is far more powerful than anybody knows. And that became one of the startling things for me in an awakening. That and I've read a little bit about you know, how your awakening took place, but mine was instantaneous. Overnight, within, it seemed like 10-minute period of time, everything I thought I knew, I had completely different information about it. I knew everything was wrong, from the top to the bottom, you name it. And, you know, growing up in the church and being part of Christianity my entire life, I could recognize the lie and the truth in the same line. And that's how people are lured into this, is that, you know, before I left Microsoft, there started to be a larger presence of NSA, where there was an entire building there that basically housed people from the government. And I recognized something's going on.
Well, I mean, I've been writing about this, and I actually write about this in detail in Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told, because what you're describing is what I've been describing for years. The question, when I started on this 30 years so far, and I've hardly started yet, exploration of how the world's controlled and who by, what you have to keep doing is going down the rabbit hole. You know, I see, I'm not knocking it. I'm you know, anyone who's putting out information that shouldn't, that according to the system shouldn't be circulating, I'm, you know, I break into a round of applause. But I see so much of the alternative media just walking around and round the rim of the rabbit hole, and they think they've sussed it, but they're actually not even in the rabbit hole yet. They're just on the periphery. If you keep going, you start to realize the world is nothing like the place, not a little bit not like you thought it was, nothing like you thought it was. So one of the things I've done is kept going, as you've described. Okay, this Silicon Valley and these massive giants, they have this power. Then you ask the question, well, why are they allowed to have this power? And why have they got this power? And of course, you very quickly realize, well, they've got this power because they're not ultimately the ones controlling it. So then you ask the question, who would want the power they have? Well, one, anyone that wants 24 surveillance of the population, where the population overwhelmingly give you their information because you don't even have to go looking for it. You want to know what someone's having for dinner? Well, just go into Facebook. Secondly, if you want this power, if you have this power, well, what you want if you're in authority is you want to control what people see and don't see for all the reasons I've just described. And thirdly, this is going further on in the rabbit hole, which 5G and all this technology, the smart technology is all about. You want to connect the human brain to artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence becomes the human mind. And of course, you'll know this, but a lot of people who are going about their lives don't realize this, how much the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons are at the cutting edge of artificial intelligence technology. So what you've got in a one-stop shop is, in one small area of the world, is these three, and there are many more, of course, but these three pillars of power that you want. And when I say you want, well, who does want them? Well, the Pentagon wants them. The intelligence networks, you've mentioned one, the National Security Agency and the CIA want that power. Mm-hmm. And I've been saying for a long time and writing for a long time now, and I go into it in detail in the book, if Google and Facebook, etc., did not exist, then the military-industrial complex, the military-industrial intelligence complex, would have to invent them. I say they did. I say their fronts for that complex have been from the start. And this is how I would explain what's going on. The idea from the start was to make the internet the absolute foundation of human society. This is why people like DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, claims that it created the internet with military technology. Mm-hmm. What you want to do, and what you have to do to start with, is give people what they want. What you want to become the pillar of society, the very foundation of it, the internet, has to be something that people want. So in the early days, what you do is you have the free flow of information. And people say, oh, this is great. You can say what you like and have your own opinion and talk to people around the world. Isn't it brilliant? At the same time, you start seed funding and bringing forth companies that you want eventually to be near monopolies of that internet and its communications. What you then do, again, when you start, is you've got to build these companies up, the Googles, the Facebooks, etc. You have to make them to be something that people want. So what did we have in the early days? Here we go again. The free flow of information. You could post what you want, say what you want. We had freedom of expression. Then you reach a point where your goal, first of all, of making the internet the very foundation of human society is achieved. We're there now, to a point where it's irreversible. At that point, and at the point where we're also have reached, which is this near monopolistic situation with these internet giants, then you say, we now have the power to start making the internet and making these companies what they were planned to be all along. Not by the people that overwhelmingly work at them. I mean, it's all compartmentalized, as you've talked about. I mean, the real force behind them. And so what we're seeing now is the censorship frenzy against alternative thought, information, and facts. And we're seeing this internet being transformed so that what suits the cabal, the military intelligence industrial complex, is left, and that which doesn't, i.e. the free flow of information and opinion, is deleted. And that's what we're seeing. And that's one of the key reasons, there are many, but one of the key reasons why they're running down newspapers now and other forms of media. Because once you get the information onto the internet, then you can kick in the algorithms and let AI do the censorship for you.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing that I think that the reason why many people have a difficult time waking up, David, is that they can't imagine how this conspiracy would work.
Oh,
But
yes.
when you come from my world and you come from the technological world of finance, of technology, you recognize that when you take that technology to if I invented a technology, I take that to a group of investors, and those investors then decide on whether they're going to give me money. And as a result, the people that are deciding whether they're going to give me money for this company, they'll tell me what they want my company to be. And so it always goes with the financing. It's always going to, if you ever want to follow anything.
That's why politicians make the decisions they do, because they're owned by money. It's exactly
they're owned by money. Yeah, and all of this goes down to the reserve. And, you know, like I've said for quite a long time, is that to me, when I read in scripture about prophecy and it says mystery Babylon, I don't think it's a mystery any longer. I believe that we've got mystery Babylon. We've got the United States dollar that is the backing dollar for every currency in the world. You've got the Federal Reserve, which has unstated debt of well over $100 trillion. And you've got a stated debt of 21 or 22 trillion dollars. There isn't enough gold and silver and other value in the world to pay back that debt. We are most definitely looking at a financial collapse that is intended to happen. And
exactly.
Yeah, and in that all yields from the establishment of these. So there's always going to be a consolidation of power through the fall of the dollar. The 2008 collapse of the dollar, which is exactly what it was. It was an initial collapse of the dollar, which they gave the excuse that it was the mortgage meltdown. But the reality is the dollar's value went to zero. And that's where quantitative easing comes in to increase the value, because just like a cryptocurrency, the value of a fiat currency is determined by the usage, because it's a faith-based currency, right? In God we trust is written right on it. That's because the dollar itself is God.
Yeah, well, if you don't believe in it, it's got no value. It's only
none.
Belief in it.
Yes, and the belief in the dollar comes by way, the parameters utilized to gauge that belief is how much you spend it. So quantitative easing was established where the government was printing $150 billion a month and force feeding it to organizations. That's why every road and every bridge was rebuilt in the entire country. They were force feeding it. And I've had relationships with financiers in the technological business where these investment groups, all forms of investment groups, were giving hundreds of billions of dollars to invest in technology to make sure it was getting spent. That would then justify the value of the dollar, and it would raise back up again. And that's why if you go on the dark web, there is a crowdfunding for hired paid killers on the dark web. And you would think that it would be Obama or some world leader that would be the #1 person on there as far as that they wanted killed. But in reality, it's not. It's Ben Bernanke, who is the one that established quantitative easing. So he is the most sought after man. He's probably heavily in hiding, but this is how this functions. It all functions through the reserve and the reserve banking system. And that's where it's also going to fall. Mystery Babylon falling from a scriptural standpoint says in a single hour, right? And then nobody will be able to buy and sell. It becomes quite obvious that the abominations that were spoken of in scripture is the abomination of the dollar itself and forcing people on, going from Saddam Hussein selling oil, right? So it is a petrodollar selling oil. willing to sell oil in his own currency. And he knew quite a bit about the ancients, which is why he has, you know, on the Saddam Hussein currency, if you actually looked at it, on one side it had his face, and on the back side it had Enki. So he was quite familiar with where he came from and who he played in these roles.
Well, these people are. I mean, one of the things that I've been tracking and exposing for the last 30 years is the bloodlines that came out of Babylon into Europe and became this basically cabal of the modern world. But, you know, explaining how it works is real simple. I understand that, you know, people look at the world and it seems a mass of random events. And so people think, well, how can there be a global conspiracy? How can they organize these random events? Well, the point is they're not random. And I have this concept of a spider's web with a spider in the center of the web, the spider being the core of where it's all coming from. And the strands immediately around the web are the most exclusive secret societies. Then as you come out, you meet the secret societies that we do know about, the Freemasons, the Knights of Malta, the Knights Templar. And then you meet what I call the cusp organizations as you come out from the spider. And these are the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, which has been fundamental in selling the global warming situation to justify the transformation of global society. And then you come through the cusp organizations and you come into governments and government agencies and banking systems and corporations and corporate media and what have you. And in the world of the scene, where we live our lives, it appears that there's loads of random decisions going on. Now, there will be, but within them, the society changing, the society directing decisions are actually being made and played out in the world of the scene, human society, that have come from this spider in the center of this web. And so how don't we know about this? Because if you look at secret societies, what are they? They are levels of initiation where the people at the bottom of the initiation pyramid have no idea what the people at the top know. I mean, the vast majority of Freemasons in the world are on the bottom 3 levels of degree in the Scottish Rite and other rites. The blue degrees, that's where most of them go. They never go any higher. And then you go up to the 33rd degree of the Scottish Rite, and they'll know things that the bottom 3 levels of degree don't know. And indeed, there are other levels beyond the official 33rd degree, which will know things that the 33rd degree doesn't know. So it's compartmentalization, where people are only allowed into the next level of degree, which is what? Knowledge, if that level of degree decides that you're worthy of it. Now, if you then look at corporations, governments, government agencies, universities, any organization virtually, they are compartmentalized pyramids where the people at the bottom of the pyramid, where the vast majority are, have no idea what the people at the top of the pyramid know. So you can work for Microsoft, you mentioned earlier, you can work for Google, you can work for Facebook and all these things, Amazon, and you'll know enough to do your job, to make your contribution, to put your little piece in the puzzle into the whole, but you won't know what you're doing and how that connects with what other people are doing. Only the few at the top will know that. Then you go beyond the ones officially at the top into the shadows where the real power is. So the number of people necessary to control and to enforce is very, very few. Very few people have to know for it to play out, because most of the people who are making it happen don't know. Oh, over here, Bill, this is what we're going to do now, okay? Can you implement this? And Bill goes away and implements it. He doesn't know why. He's just doing his job. This is how the system works. Keep people in ignorance of the fact that every day they are contributing to their own enslavement and their children's enslavement, their families' enslavement every day, without realizing that's what they are doing. And that is what's happening in AI. You know, I see some of these AI people talking, and they are promoting AI because they're obsessed with AI. It's their thing. But when you ask them, well, hold on a minute, when this AI is connected to the human brain, which people like, Ray Kurzweil at Google again is talking about by 2030 or that kind of period. Who controls the AI and how it affects the human mind? And then they suddenly go quiet. They've never even thought about it. Oh no, let's see what we can do, and let's see what we can do more. And this is how it works. The vast majority of people have no idea that they are daily contributing to the very conspiracy they deny exists.
Yeah, it's remarkable though. Everybody sells out. It's kind of the scriptural Sao or Esau, what people, however they might know the pronunciation of the name, but selling his birthright for a little bit of food. That is what I believe people do every single day. When I hear an officer violating somebody's rights, and he knows that he's violating their rights, he knows that he's violating a human right, and you say, "Why are you doing that?" And he'll go, "Well, I'm just doing my job." And I go, that excuse isn't going to fly, right? When everything comes down, that's not going to fly. You've now contributed, and you know that you've contributed to the violation of somebody else's rights to such a degree, and you know it inside, but you're willing to sacrifice that. And so that's probably a good segue to for the spiritual side of it, because we all have this, we all have an understanding. Everybody, I guarantee you in this room, and we have 1,194 people watching live right now. So we all know that this corruption has taken place. But what is the solution? Because what I speak about on a daily basis on this channel is helping people understand that what they've been told is in the scriptures, what they're taught and how they're taught is the lie. That the lie that they think, the lie is the way that they understand the scriptures, but actually in the words of Christ, he's telling you how to escape. He's explaining to you what this is. And by and large, the religions, Christianity, everybody, they deny these things. If you want to be a Christian today and be at a church, you basically have to ignore about 95% of everything that Christ said, because you wouldn't find it easy to follow that guy's terms when he says, "Let the dead bury the dead," right? Basically, take care of yourself, follow me. So there is this understanding and wisdom in those words. So I try to explain people without a religious bent, right? I'm not supporting any religion whatsoever. Religion is the way that this has been controlled, this guilt control matrix. And so, and I posit to everybody that Christ wasn't speaking about a religion. In fact, on the contrary, he was destroying the idea of religion. He was opening up people to the idea of what love was when he reduced basically the 10 commandments down to 2, because they encompass everything. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, thy soul, and their mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. In those 2 lie all the law and all the prophet, he said. So just in those 2, both love, right? Love the Lord thy God. Now, who is that? Well, in his mind and what he was speaking of, it was in him. The kingdom was within you, he said, right? So we individually have the power to escape this, and we individually have the power, and then collectively, as we're individualized, right, getting away from this Vesca Pisces system where all of our minds are interlinked and we are pushed to have a consciousness, a singular consciousness. There can be a singular consciousness, but that consciousness and what we are made of is what is being abused.
Well, I don't talk, or certainly in the books, I don't talk about the if you like, 5 sense manipulation without talking about the nature of reality. Because I said earlier that, you can connect the banking scam from Middle East wars and connect them to the nature of reality, and more to the point, the suppression of the nature of reality. One of the biggest hijacks that is so fundamental to the control of humanity is the hijacking of what we call science. Science is not the independent pursuit of knowledge. It is operating within a straitjacket, which I call scientism, which is another religion, a belief system. When I see people like Professor Richard Dawkins at Oxford University, who's always railing into religion, which he has every right to do. It's just his opinion. But what he doesn't realize is that he is the high priest of his own scientism. Mm-hmm. This is that the mainstream orthodoxy of science, which despite the existence of quantum physics, still goes about its business as if this is a solid world and the five senses are all that exists, basically, in terms of life. And the orthodoxy is mainstream science orthodoxy. That's the religious orthodoxy of scientism. And anyone over the years in science who's questioned these norms, these orthodoxies, has been ridiculed and dismissed and marginalized by mainstream science, because whatever mainstream science believes in the moment is the orthodoxy that has to be defended from all challenge. And then eventually, enough information and evidence has come about to move that orthodoxy just a little bit, because we can't go on believing that this is so-and-so, because it's obviously not. But then it solidifies again, and the same process starts. And anyone that's talking about life beyond the perception of the body is kind of a weird person who not really scientifically credible. But what I'm saying, and indeed, of course, the evidence is gathering all the time, is that what we need to do is to realize that the I, the eternal I, is not what you see in the mirror. That is the vehicle for the eternal I to experience this reality. And when the body's cycle is over, that real I leaves the body and continues its eternal exploration of infinity. So what is this eternal I? I would bring it down in the simplest terms to the fact that we are all points of attention, points of observation within one infinite state of consciousness. And you can call that state of consciousness God, call it what you like, that state of consciousness. And we are a point of attention within it. Now, that point of attention can be so focused and narrow and programmed through the body and the world of programmed perception that I've talked about, that you can perceive who you are to be your name, your race, your religion, your income bracket, and that's who I am, that's me. No, that is a series of experiences, labels for experiences that you are having. The real I is the awareness that is having those experiences, and they're not the same thing. Because once and this is what this cabal wants to do, this is why it works so hard and has worked so hard to give us a self-identity and get us to accept a self-identity that the I are these labels, which are just experiences. Because once you can get people to believe I am these labels, then these other people here who believe they're a different set of labels can be played off against each other and divide and rule. So you can have income bracket against income bracket, and class against class, and religion against religion, and race against race. And it's this illusion of the real I that allows this divide and rule to happen. And if you also realize that death is an illusion, it's just that the end of a cycle of experience within a certain range of frequency we call the world, then this mad dash from cradle to grave to get what you want and all this stuff and walking over people to get there, it all kind of calms down, because this is not 70 years and 10 and that's it. So oh, go, yeah, we got to go race everywhere. We haven't got much time. You've got forever. You got infinity. Chill out. Enjoy the moment. And realize that the moment you perceive as time is actually an eternal moment, an eternal now. And even time is an illusion of this construct of experience that we're having. Now, once you start to self-identify with being the consciousness having the experience, an eternal expression of consciousness, which can be the size of a pea or infinite, depends on how much we want to expand our consciousness to tap into it, then you start to see life in a completely different way. And one thing you stop self-identifying with once you realize the true nature of the I is little me. I've got no power. You've got as much power as you want to tap into. And the idea is to so focus attention and self-identity on the labels that you can play them off against each other. And look what's happening now. The labels are subdividing and subdividing and subdividing so that people are self-identifying now through this manipulation with narrower and narrower senses of self. All this LGBT, blah, 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 it's like an alphabet, right? No, look, you know, do what you like is my philosophy, so long as you don't impose it on anyone else. That's the big thing with me. But don't get caught in the idea that all these letters in a line getting bigger by the day, no, make that the hour, are who you are. It's not. It's what you're experiencing. And if you fall for that as a self-identity, as the I, then you can be played like a violin. And that's what's happening.
You know, it's funny, the labels that you speak of, I talk about boxes within boxes, is that when somebody comes to me, you know, and if they want to ask me a question about what it is that I believe, they'll ask me, are you a Christian? And the very first thing I say is, I don't know what your idea of Christianity is, so I can't answer you in the affirmative, because I would be answering what your belief system is of that. And considering that there's 30,000 plus denominations, I guarantee you that whatever I would agree to isn't actually what I believe, so I won't answer you. But that's a box. And also these labels, you know, you've been castigated as well as I have. I know that you've got 30 years of being beat up on. So I won't pretend to have the equivalence of that, right? So, but I mean, I get death threats. I get, you know, I'm called Satan. I'm called the devil. You name it. And all of these are boxes. They call me a Gnostic, Luciferian, you name it, right? And the reality is that they don't recognize that they're trying to beat up the box. So hopefully, if they can damage the exterior, that everything else that I've said might go away as well. And the only reason why they're upset, David, is because I've destroyed their identity. I've destroyed their false perception. Otherwise, they wouldn't be upset, right? So,
I call them,
and that's what you've done.
I call them IMRs. I am and after that comes the label. I am man, woman, this, that, the other. And once you're an IMR, then your self-identity is little me, because IMRs are basically 5 sense constructs of perceived identity. And, you know, the reason that people want to label everyone else is because that's all they perceive of themselves. Once you self-identify with labels, then you're going to perceive everyone else to have labels. And when you are someone like me, and clearly someone like you, who will not be labeled, they can't work it out. Or you've got to be something. I mean, you know, I've been called everything under the sun. You know, I find it quite funny, because this is the other thing, you see. Once you self-identify with being the eternal I, the I of awareness, of infinite awareness, then what people say about you, it goes in one ear and out the other, doesn't touch the sides, because you are not offended, because you're not self-identifying with what they're attacking. You know, being offended has become weaponized. People are being encouraged and pressured to be offended by more and more things, because that provides more and more excuses to censor what they're offended about, right? This is why it's happening. And the more you subdivide senses of self-identity, as this string of letters gets longer, the more you're going to have reasons for people to be offended, and the more excuses you're going to have to stop people saying what they're offended by. Being offended is a choice. People who are confident in themselves and confident of what they're saying and confident of what they stand for do not want to silence people having a different opinion. They're quite happy for their opinions and their views to be challenged, to be questioned, because you're confident that, they'll stand up to that challenge. If you're not, you want to silence people so they're never challenged. And see, this is how it works. There is an agenda which is being pushed upon us, and one of its expressions is the transgender agenda, which is not about protecting transgender people from discrimination. That's just the original excuse. That's just the foot in the door. You talk to people who have been through the transgender transition, I mean, physically through surgery, who've regretted it, and you talk to them about what happens when they try to speak out and warn other people to actually think a bit longer. They get abuse from the transgender lobby, and they attempts to silence them because they're not singing from the song sheet that the agenda wants people to accept. This is why the ultra-Zionists attack Jewish people who question the behavior of Israel, because it's not about protecting Jewish people from discrimination. It's about protecting Israel from exposure and challenge. So all these things are quite blatantly just part of what I call a gigantic protection racket, protecting people that deserve challenge and being exposed from actually having either. And so what you have also is this whole agenda, and it is, and I've charted it back in the last book that you've mentioned, back at least to the 1920s, and it will go back further, of the mass movements of people from one part of the world to another, into Europe, into the United States. It's an agenda. You can chart it back. This is not just happening. It's happening because it's being made to happen. And here's a rule of thumb, if you like, for is it the agenda or not? Very simple question. Am I allowed to have a different opinion about it? Am I allowed to have a say about it that's different from the official version of this subject or this situation? If the answer is no, and it increasingly is, but certainly in terms of the mass movement of peoples and a transgender, the answer is certainly no. You're not allowed to have a different opinion, because if you do, you're immediately called a bigot, a Nazi, a racist, or whatever, because it's a very simple thing. If having a debate would mean you would lose, you don't have the debate. You shut it down by hurling abuse at people and using censorship to stop people saying things you don't want people to hear. So this is what is happening. This is why we're not having a debate, is because they would lose. I mean, if we had a debate about male-female biology, and one side in the debate is saying that men and women are not biologically different, well, you ain't going to win that debate, are you? I mean, you're not. I mean, have a look in the mirror. You're not going to win the debate. We're different. It's just a different vehicle to express a different experience for our awareness. That's all it is. Chill out. Same with race, all of it. So you're not going to win the debate. So you shut it down. And you have professors of biology fired for having the audacity to say, actually, men and women are biologically different. So this is why the debate's being shut down, because they can't win it.
Well, I'm quite honestly, I'm ecstatic that men and women are biologically different.
Of course, what a bore! What a bore if we were all the same.
No
Why don't we
kidding.
celebrate diversity instead of using it as a vehicle to silence people and abuse people. Okay, I mean, I don't care. I'll tell you now, I couldn't care less if this is black, white, Jewish, Hindu. I don't care, Chinese. It's just a vehicle for my consciousness to experience this reality. And once you start getting, because this is the thing, you see, I mean, everything's an inversion. The whole world's an inversion. Look at those people who are obsessed with race and everything's about race and racism. Well, what are they? They're obsessed with race. They
Division.
judge people by race. They don't judge them by their consciousness, but by race. And then they castigate everyone else as racist when they're absolutely racist because they're obsessed with race. They look at someone and they say, he's white, he's privileged. What, the white guy sleeping in the street every night? That white supremacy, is it? It's ridiculous.
Well,
I won't stand for it, and I won't be silenced on it either. So you have this inversion where people are obsessed with race, call other people racists. People who call people sexist when they're obsessed with the sex of somebody. I mean, we're just conscious of having an experience, but they can't see that because they are absolutely addicted, and that's what it is, and perceptually programmed to perceive only the 5 sense level of experience instead of the infinite level of the true self.
Yeah, they don't understand that. And even in their own religion, David, it's remarkable to me that, I tell Christians, I'll say, wait a minute, you are infinite. You already have eternal life. And they'll say, no, we don't have eternal life. You have to give your life to Jesus. And I go, wait a minute. In all religions, it is either eternal damnation or eternal life, right? So both of them are eternal. Regardless of what you think, you are an eternal being. They're just trying to scare your eternity into returning to this miserable existence rather than escaping the matrix that we are within. I wanted to ask you a question. I've got quite a few questions from people that have come up. I just wanted to make sure that I try to cover some of them. Okay. So many people have asked me, I got quite a few questions to ask your opinion of CERN and what CERN's agenda is.
Well, that's a kind of a long story with lots of things connecting into everything. So, putting it in a couple of sentences
is difficult. I understand that.
But in
good or evil.
But everything you need to know, as you've ever been told, is never been told, actually goes into this, but puts it in the context of everything else. No, I don't think it's a good thing at all. You see, this electromagnetic field of the Earth. See, let me just put this into the wider context then of how I'm seeing things. We live in a sea of energy, and that energy is information. A sea of information, and I call it cosmic Wi-Fi. And the Earth's magnetic field is an expression of that cosmic Wi-Fi as it relates to the Earth. And we are constantly interacting with it because, we see the 5 sense body, but you go deeper into the electromagnetic levels of what's called the auric field, etc. And on that level, we are interacting with this cosmic Wi-Fi. And if you can infuse that with information, if you can distort it so it's vibrationally distorted and not in balance and harmony, then that starts to impact on the human energetic field, and we go into be expressions of that disharmony, dis-ease. And this is why anything that is messing up and distorting and destabilizing that magnetic field is going to adversely affect us. And I say that on one level, and many other levels, my goodness, that is what CERN is doing with this gigantic ring. And I was looking at a story only this week. Funnily enough, it came out in the media, but it was in my books ages ago, years and years and years ago. that the magnetic field of the Earth is going walkabout. It's moving in terms of its northern pole focus, etc. And something's going on that's messing with the Earth's magnetic field. Then you throw in this deluge gathering all the time of technologically generated frequencies through the smart technology, and my goodness, 5G, which is a massive step beyond it, which they're starting now to roll out. And you're looking at a constant distortion of the magnetic field of the Earth and the energetic fields that we're interacting with. Now, if you're interacting with something, when that gets distorted, you start getting distorted, and it starts to affect you. So that on that level, there's a lot of negative messing about on purpose with the fields of energy and information that we are interacting with. And it's all part of this process of replacing, if you like, the natural Earth field with a technologically generated one. You know, that they're putting up thousands and thousands of satellites, firing technologically generated, if you like, Wi-Fi, 5G to come at the Earth, so that every square inch of the Earth is being hit by this stuff and no one can escape from it. This is being done all the time. And I'll tell you a great irony is the companies whose rockets, if you like, are putting them up there more than anyone else is Elon Musk and SpaceX. Mm-hmm. I mean, someone ought to ask him next time they interview him, why do you say that AI could be the end of humanity, which is absolutely right. The end of humanity as we know it. If AI becomes the human mind, where's the human mind that we call human now gone? But when you're saying that, why do you open a company, Neuralink, to connect AI and technology to the human brain? And why are you putting up this stuff to fire back this at the Earth when that is absolutely essential to this technologically generated field of information becoming real? Because see, what they're doing as we are interacting on this electromagnetic level with the field of the Earth, they want to replace that connection first by distorting the Earth field, so distorting us, but also by generating a technologically generated alternative field of energy information, which will then be manipulating our thoughts, our emotions, our what we call physical health. And it's real simple. You know, every time you think and every time you feel an emotion, depending on the emotion and the thought, they're generating different frequencies. They're all frequencies. Hate is a frequency. Love is a different frequency. And they know what those frequencies are. I was talking in my books years ago about how they'd work them out. So now, if they can technologically fire out particular frequencies, they can start affecting the mental and emotional state of the population. For instance, if you want to riot because it suits a riot suits you, because then you can change society by saying we must do something to stop another riot, i.e. more police state, then all you've got to do is fire out the frequency that triggers people into this anger, fury state across a community.
And they've done that in Brazil.
Yeah. And then what you do is you just do something to light the blue touch paper, maybe beat a black guy up or something in a black community, and bingo, you're off. And you're off with a reaction, a communal reaction that has been made far more extreme by the stuff that you've been using to wind people up. You know, where people live near power lines, or they live near these towers pounding out these frequencies, they don't get certain diseases and emotional problems by accident and random chance. They get them because they're being affected by that. Well, you can target communities in that way, and as you say, it's already happening. And 5G, the millimeter range of 5G, in that range are the frequencies that the American military and police whack out from these mobile vehicles that disperse crowds by making them feel like their skin is on fire. Because as some scientists have explained, the sweat ducts and the skin can be turned into antenna by this technology. And this is what we're sleepwalking into, and why some of us are trying everything we can to alert people to it, to head this off.
I personally have experienced being what I would call radiated. In Los Angeles, I remember that it literally felt like that I was being microwaved, and my skin was going to burn right off. But yet there was no boils, there was nothing happening, but I was being burned, and I can't explain it. And the only thing that you can do is run and try to get underneath something and hide. It was a terrifying. I couldn't figure out what was going on. In fact, at that time, there was nothing about targeted individuals. I didn't know anything about any of that. But, at the time, I was working with Andrew Breitbart and exposing a whole bunch of the elements of the cabal. And Andrew Breitbart called me, and he told me that he was receiving notifications from the feds and notifications from those in Anonymous. And Anonymous was telling him that the feds were coming to kill him, and the feds were telling him that Anonymous was coming to kill him. And that was at about 10:45 at night. And I woke up at 7 o'clock in the morning listening that he had been killed on the news. So it was after that that I started to experience being targeted in that way. And it was terrifying. And they do this. And the thing is that I know that the technology exists. This is not, it's not as though they don't tell you. And this is where I always say that there seems to be, David, a very much a judgment that they are also concerned about, because the plausible deniability actions, just like in scripture, that they tell you the lie and the truth at the same time. It's kind of like 9/11. 9/11 NIST, the representative of NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which I was a member of. I worked in standards in all technology, particularly around media. And the remarkable thing is what he said when they were talking about whether the buildings were blown up. And he said, "We found no evidence of explosives at ground zero." Well, that's a truthful statement and a lie at the same time. The omission is they didn't look for explosives because they knew that nanothermite was present, right? Nanothermite comes from one place, comes from the CIA and Los Alamos laboratories, period. So, and that's how easily it is, this plausible deniability that they can say, what do you mean? We told them the truth, but we also told them the lie. And every single time they accepted the lie instead of the truth. They always tell you what they're doing. I wanted to ask you a question. I just wanted to state that it's remarkable that you mentioned that the transgender community, when those people have when they have a regret, that they then get attacked by that community. We have somebody in the chat room, a group called the Cummings, which have their own channel, which they speak specifically about that. I've spoken to them many times. They're both transgender. They regret the decisions, that it was an emotional decision. And now they're attacked viciously by the LGBT community. So I just wanted to confirm that what you said is true. And they were in the chat room commenting about that. And by the way, we have 1,553. You're quite a popular guy, David. So I love that you're here and being able to give everybody this information. But
the thing is that this whole transgender thing is an abuse of transgender people. Because it's not about protecting them from discrimination. I mean, they're pushing against an open door on that with me. I mean, discrimination is always the work of idiocy. But the idea is, and they've pushed it on now, of course, to confuse people about their gender who weren't confused before. And what they are seeking to do is target the young more than anyone else. And we had a story, it must have been about 6 months ago now in Britain, where it was revealed that the number of girls, young girls in England, who are basically wanting to redefine their gender has increased by 4,500 times. Now, that has not happened by chance. It's happened by propaganda and what they're doing in the schools. Once you have something that is so focused on one thing, when that thing is still extremely rare, well, you know you're dealing with the agenda. When teachers are being told that they can't say this and they must present things in a certain way because they might upset transgender children, and there's absolutely no transgender children in the school, never mind the classroom, you know you're dealing with an agenda here, and it's a very sinister one. And it's one that I go into in the books and in the last one, because this transgender thing is not happening in isolation. Absolutely nothing's happening in isolation. It's part of an ongoing agenda to transform the nature of the human body and to completely transform what the human is. And first of all, you disconnect perception from the idea of male and female, and you fuse it and fuse it and fuse it and fuse it until you've got basically a human form that's not male, not female, doesn't have gender. And of course, a non-gender human body, which they're already working on, I go into this in the books, cannot procreate. And, you know, that takes you into Brave New World and Aldous Huxley about the end of parents, and where there are no parents, and that people and children are produced in world state hatchery centers through technological means, because there's no means of procreation, because the nature of the human body has been changed so it doesn't procreate. And part of this agenda, as again, the strands are all there to pull together, is that sperm counts are plummeting, testosterone counts are plummeting. This locks into the war on masculinity. These are all connected to the same thing. Transgender, the explosion, is all connected into this. And it's targeting the young and the very young for many reasons. One reason being that they will be the adults when they want to start to really bring in this full blown. You know, if people think it's crazy now, well, just ask yourself, what's it going to be like for your kids and grandkids? That's what drives me on, among many other things.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think that depopulation is a real agenda?
Well, I think it is, and one of the reasons is that if you look at what's happening, there has been obviously a lot of people, and the human population has grown. And there have been many efforts like the eugenics movement of the Rockefellers and the Bushes and people, the Harrimans, etc., and in Europe, that have sought to target populations and particular genotypes within populations. But we're entering a point now where the world is about to change in a way that most people still haven't grasped, and that's AI. The number of people that this cabal now needs to run their system is about to dramatically reduce, because AI is taking more and more jobs. Obviously, we've seen the robot production lines in factories, but now they're heading into the what are called the professional classes. It's starting to move in on even journalism being written by AI, some of it now, with Google funding projects to push it on. We're seeing AI moving into the lawyer profession with stuff of documents and stuff like that. And it's moving into all these areas, and the job opportunities for people, and from the cabal's point of view, the number of people that need to do them is going to dramatically reduce. And then we're into a massive increase in what Kissinger memorably called useless eaters, people who there is no need for them from their sick perspective. So I think, yes, and this is the point. If you look at 5G and you look at the fact that it has the great potential to unravel DNA, to create massive distortions within the human organism, then, you know, where's the depopulation coming from? Well, put your computer on, have a look at your smartphone. That's where it's coming from. And of course, they have the technological means to do that. I mean, when you've got thousands of satellites circulating the Earth, pounding this stuff at the Earth so that no one on Earth can escape it, then you have enormous potential for depopulation. Because I said that, for instance, this is just an example, that within the millimeter band, this which they're now starting to access for 5G, which is not an increase on 4G, it's a completely different entity. The millimeter band includes that frequency that makes you think your skin's on fire. Well, obviously, they're not going to pound that out from the little boxes all the way down the street that's necessary for 5G, because it doesn't travel very far. Initially, the point is they are transmitters of frequency. That's what they do. They'll transmit 5G. But where on the millimeter band could they move it to if they choose? Once this stuff's in place, they've got the potential to start pounding out whatever they want. And it's the internet, it's the internet giants, it's get the foot in the door. Hey, yeah, you'll be able to download a movie in seconds. You won't have to wait a few minutes any longer. I mean, oh yeah, well, I'll have that. That's
the Internet of Things, right? So you're basically the internet. So AI will be broadcast to you in a frequency that you hear it as your own voice. It basically becomes your consciousness.
Exactly. Now, the point is that the Internet of Things is the first step. And I tell you how fast this is going. I was writing books, years and years ago, but not like 50 years ago, talking about the Internet of Things and warning about it. And now it's here. And you've got all these gadgets, billions of them connected to the internet. So who controls those gadgets, what they do, whether they keep surveillance on you or not? Whoever controls the internet. The next stage, which is what I've been talking about, is what they're calling apparently the Internet of Everything, which is to have the human mind connected to the internet. So whatever controls the internet connects the human mind. It's so blatant and it's so simple. It's not complex. The human brain operates within certain bands of frequency. If you can broadcast on those bands of frequency, you can dictate the information the human brain will process into human perception. It's that simple, and that's where we are now. They try to hide you and blind you with technological complication, but you break it down. That's what we're looking at.
It's I don't think people actually understand just how pervasive AI already is. I was on the phone the other day with Progressive Insurance, and it sounds like a real person on the other line. And I picked up that I had asked the same question twice in two different ways, and I got the exact same response. So I started testing based on some questions that I was asking. And you don't realize that when you have a conversation with one of these companies and they say that your call is being recorded for quality assurance, well, they're also recording your voice, and that goes into a database. Your voice can be replicated as an agent, and is that they've got every single word that ever needs to be said in responses, and they compile these things. And so it actually is a real agent on the other line. It's just utilizing AI in response to the questions. So anybody that thinks that that it's not actually playing a role right now, that AI also is determining what you feel. So they are utilizing AI to determine exactly where your conscious state is. Now, this is where I always say that, for instance, that 9/11 was a collective archetype to get everybody's mind focused on one single thing. The whole world saw that. And so that was intended to bring all of their mind into one place. That was the old form. Technology is advanced and AI is advanced so quickly that they can do the same thing with the internet and all of these things. And AI will be broadcasting this through 5G directly to you, and it will already be your instinct. People will think it's their own thoughts.
Exactly.
And yeah, they'll think it's their own thought. And this is what's so terrifying. This is why it's incredibly important, I've always stated, right now, to have your conscious state, to know what the deal is, so you know what is the lie and what is the truth. If you don't know that before we get there, I believe you're in deep, deep, deep trouble. They'll be able to convince people to kill themselves in the masses.
Well, how many people has that already happened to on social media? You know, this is how I would come to that subject you're talking about. The brain is simply a processor of information. What the brain processes depends on the information it receives. Now, we have this infinite state of awareness, which has no form, it's just a state of awareness. And the more that you open yourself to that self-identity, to that infinite awareness that is just as wide and as massive and as deep as you want to allow in, the power of that is far more powerful than technological frequencies. I mean, they're the village idiot and the six-stone weakling compared with consciousness in its power. But if you're self-identifying with labels and the little me sense of self, you're not accessing that power. And therefore, the level of awareness that you're operating on can be overpowered by technological frequency. So it's about focusing people's attention on the little me, on the level of the five sense only. So you're operating on a tiny fraction of your power of awareness, and then feeding the brain technologically with perceptual states, which the brain will process into, as you rightly say, what you perceive to be your own thoughts and emotions, because that technological bombardment is more powerful. Therefore, that's what the brain will process than the consciousness that we call human. And when you break out of that five sense perceptual prison, then you let levels of awareness, powers of awareness, of energy, of consciousness in that can overpower, like a fly on an elephant's back, if you open enough, can overpower this technologically generated perceptual manipulation. And those people will be increasingly obvious when the mass perceptual technological states start to influence people, and they already are, but just a matter of degree. There will be others that won't be influenced by them. And the perceptions of the two will be dramatically different. And that's why, as well as understanding in a names, dates, place, five sense intellectual way what is going on, alongside that, this spiritual awakening, not religious awakening, not new age awakening, this opening up to a greater expansion of awareness that we are tapping into is so important, because that's the way this is going to be turned around. A few people can only control and direct 7.5 plus billion. If those 7.5 plus billion are overwhelmingly not in their true power, that are overwhelmingly self-identifying with labels and little me.
Yes, I think, you know, that we're going to see a massive divide here. I mean, you've got them preparing the altar and sacrificing a sheep in Jerusalem and preparing. They've got all the sacraments ready. They're preparing for what will be a trigger of essentially a World War III situation, where you're going to have a divide right now amongst Christians, Judaism, Islam. All of that is going to take place around this third temple being built, and the comparison of Trump and Cyrus. We've got so many different things that are taking place, and I believe that that over the last little while, the distraction, whenever the government's focused on something, like something as simple as $15 billion over a wall built for Mexico, to me, I go, you print money for nothing. You print it at will, and yet you're arguing over $15 billion for a fence. What are you trying to stop us from looking at elsewhere in the world? What else is going on that you don't want people to know about? And
yeah, the wall is a focus of attention that they're always trying to give us them, because they don't want us to do that. They want us to do that all the time, and it's also part of this whole movement of people agenda as well. But yeah, you're absolutely right to pick up on Jerusalem, because, you know, this whole Zionism, what I call ultra Zionism, the real extremists like your Netanyahus and your Mossads and people like that, they are part of a web, and therefore it's not about Jewish people. It's about their contribution to the web. And Jewish people are there to be manipulated and exploited by this ultra-Zionist cabal. And they're part of the web, as the American people are there to be manipulated by their cabal, and they're part of the web. And you look, for instance, at this goal, which is very obvious for anyone who's looked at it, to replace the mosque in Jerusalem, in East Jerusalem, with a rebuilt Solomon's temple. Now, this is nothing to do with Israelis and doing something for them. It's part of an ancient satanic Babylonian, and then some beyond, plan. This is why the Knights Templar that were established in the 12th century have had the rebuilding of Solomon's temple on their agenda all along. People think, oh, it's something to do with Zionism, since the Rothschild created Zionist movement started basically moved into gear in the 19th century. No. This is a long plan. And it's to do with Satanism. This is if you look at the inner cabal of America, the inner cabal of Christianity, the inner cabal of Judaism, not necessarily Judaism, but the Zionist religion, the ultra-Zionist religion, and you look at the inner core of Saudi-generated, British Empire-generated Wahhabism, which of course is the religion of Saudi Arabia and of ISIS. In its core, they're run by Satanists, they're run by psychopaths. And because the Saudis, like this Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, are satanic psychopaths in the same cult as your Netanyahus, in the same cult as others in other parts of the world, they operate as one unit. I mean, the Saudi royal family and the Israeli ultra-Zionist elite have been working together all along. It's just coming more to the surface now, becoming more obvious. So this web is actually at its core, where I described the spider and the different elements of it. It's satanic. It's psychopathic. And what do psychopaths have? They have no empathy. That's why they don't care about the rest of the humanity. They don't care about Jewish people or or the Netanyahus and stuff, and the Mossads and the Shin Bets and all these people. They don't care about Jewish people any more than the cabal in America cares about Americans. They care about this satanic agenda. And it's the satanic religion of ancient Babylon and other places, which has been brought through to modern times. In Babylon, they could do it openly. Now they have to do it secretly, although they're bringing the basic tenets of the satanic religion more and more onto public display in their symbolism. And on public display, you're seeing more and more of it, because the idea is, I've been seeing all these years where the people have talked about what's coming is the one world everything, including the one world religion. Well, the one world religion ultimately is meant to be Satanism. That's why they want to destroy other religions. I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in a religion. I've explained my philosophy. But if people want to express their spirituality and their lives through religion, well, round of applause. It's none of my business. But the fact is, whether you agree with religion or not, the religions are being targeted. They're being targeted purposely to destroy them, so that the one world religion, which is Satanism, the religion of Babylon, etc., can be the one world religion. That's where we're going.
Well, what's remarkable to me, David, that you mentioned that, because you're not the first person to say that. I think that Christ said that a few thousand years ago, and that was written when he told the Hebrews, "Your father is Satan." And the God of the Old Testament, essentially, I've been expressing this to everybody. I go, you don't understand. If you actually read the scriptures, again, they're telling you the truth and the lie. You got David that is told to count the people for taxation and war, and then by God, and then he has to repent to God for doing exactly what God asked him to do. So you have this duality. So Satanism, yes, I think this goes back to, just as you said, ancient Babylonian days. You've got the sons of Enlil and Icke. If you follow the cuneiform texts, obviously multiple different names those two have gone under for quite some time. This is an ancient plot. And like you said, that time is an illusion created for this construct. So we think, well, how could something be continuing through time? Time is the illusion. They're far more advanced. As long as we are willing to look at these ancient texts and think that we're more advanced than they were, you're never going to be able to see the truth within them. And
the point is, of course, that people have this idea that what people call evolution, in other words, more and more knowledge, more and more awareness, more and more intelligence, can only go one way. It can't. I mean, where does intelligence and awareness come from at this level of reality? It comes from knowledge, it comes from information. And if you can put the lid on information, which is what they did, then you have societies that appear to advance technologically, but in terms of consciousness, innate intelligence, they go back. And so it's been very clear to me. I've been one area of my research, I'm fascinated by it over the decades, is the knowledge that was in the ancient world that has been suppressed. And part of it is, and you kind of indicated it a bit there, one of the main things really that I get ridiculed about, like I say, in one ear and out the other, thanks for sharing that with me, is that I'm saying that ultimately there's a non-human force behind all this. And the fact is, again, it's on public display if people want to look for it. You look at the ancient societies, the ancient cultures, no matter what they are, and there's this common theme of the gods or some force manipulating human society. You look at what the Gnostics said about what they call the archons. You look at what the Islamic religion and the pre-Islamic world said about the jinn, and they're describing the same force. And exactly. Then you look at Christianity, and they're talking about demons. They're talking about sons of God who interbred with the daughters of men and all this stuff. Now, these same themes can be found everywhere, and therefore behind all this is this non-human force, this is what the spider is, really, if you go deep enough. And all this satanic ritual that they do is basically rituals of worship and interaction with this force. You know, these people are not doing these rituals on particular days, at particular times, in particular forms today, which are virtual exact repeats of what they were doing in Babylon and other ancient societies. They're not doing it because it's a bit of fun. They're doing it because it's what they've always done. It's the way they interact with their, quote, gods, their masters, their demonic masters. And this is ultimately what's behind all this. But this is the point. That force can only control humanity and dictate our world if it can pull us into its frequency, into its awareness, into its state of being. If we won't go there, because if you want to act as a psychopath, then you are working on actually a very low frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you can only control people and absorb them into your control, by pulling them into your frequency. You look at a lot of ancient texts, they're actually describing this. They're not talking about frequency, but that's what they're describing. And if you look, and this is a point that I make and write about in detail in Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. If you look at what's happening now, they're connecting, or want to connect, AI to the human brain.
Mm-hmm.
I ask a question. What is AI? Yes, on one level, it's algorithms and codes, but then there's learning AI, where this AI is constantly learning as a result of all the information we're giving to the internet and social media. It's being absorbed by this AI. So it's becoming a field of expertise on human behavior. But there are other levels of what is called AI, artificial intelligence. And I say one level of that AI is this force. And if we start getting connected technologically to AI, then we can be absorbed and assimilated into that mind and become just expressions of it. And I say that's exactly what's happening. If you go deep and deep and deep in the rabbit hole, that's what's happening.
Yes, I've always said that we are being abused. We are being abused in the way that the hive mind that they're trying to create is actually a consciousness that we have all together, right? And they're just basically abusing us for what it is. David, you've been gracious enough. I mean, we went over our time that you have allotted to be able to continue with this, but I wanted to just tell you how much I appreciate you coming on the show, and everybody. Tell everybody where they can find your book. It's at is it the iconic.com?
No, it's if they go to davidicke.com, which is the website where there's news from the another angle every day, actually being put up all day. They'll find if they go into the books or the bookstore, I think they call it, then they'll be able to get to it. Everything You Need to Know But Have Never Been Told. And it connects a massive amount of dots that don't appear on the surface to be connected, but fundamentally are, because in the end, everything connects to everything else. And you can't understand the world from one dot. You have to see relationships to other dots, because if you look at anything in and of itself, it looks a certain way, but you connect them and the same things look totally different. And that's what the book does. Terrific.
Well, I encourage everybody to go. David, we've had 1,700 people live in the chat room watching the show. So everybody, if you have not gotten David's books, I would suggest you read them all. Any of David's books, I've really gotten a lot from them, and I'm sure many people have as well. I encourage everybody to go to davidicke.com and purchase one of David's books. I suggest probably the all-encompassing one would be the most recent one. So do that. David, I appreciate you coming on the show with me. You're welcome here anytime. And if you would if you would just stick around, I'll drop the stream just so I can say goodbye to you personally and give my appreciation to you. Thank you very much.
By the way, just one quick mention. I forgot. There's a film coming out in March. It's called Renegade.
Renegade. This is the film about you. Yes. I saw that. Is this a documentary?
Yeah, it's about my life and work, and it's been, you know, a professional movie making team in America have put it together. We've shot at many locations, and it's coming out in March. There's going to be premieres in Los Angeles and New York, and we're trying to get one in Toronto, also San Francisco, where they'll be there, and then one in London. And I did it because it kind of talks about my life and how all this came about, but the theme all the way through it is banging out this information, and I'm really hoping it's going to be a vehicle to alert a lot more people who wouldn't normally look at this information to see actually it's not some fantasy. It actually makes sense.
Well, certainly, David, you've done a lot to wake up a lot of people, and yes, it's no question about it that a film such as this will definitely get the message out. I'll make sure that I promote that, and maybe I'll drop by one of the premieres.
Oh, it'd be great to see you.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. Just stick around for 1 second. Thank you, everyone, for joining in the chat room, and thank you, moderators, for doing such a phenomenal job. I see you working very hard there. Love everybody, and continue. Stay in the spirit. Find yourself. Find your higher self. Love you very much. We'll talk to you.